Hello, and welcome to Fighting Over the VCR. My name is Matthew.
And my name is Nancy.
And welcome to our second episode of the wonderful month of October, where this week is going to be interesting.
It's going to be really interesting.
So, I really had a lot of fun, revisiting a couple horror movies last time. But I think this week, for me, I got like a good range of what is good and what is not good.
Yes, I agree.
And I'm going to talk about a movie that
is good.
I have grown to appreciate more and more as I've watched it, and it is slowly becoming my favorite scary movie of all time.
Really?
I mean, there's just something, I rewatched it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So we'll get to that later.
What movie is that?
We're going to talk about later the original 1978 Halloween. But first, we're going to dive into Nancy's past.
Oh, God.
And talk about a movie that it must only be a cult classic of a very, very exclusively small cult.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say about these two movies this week is we got to revisit. Last week we visited two historic directors in Wes Craven and Steven Spielberg, but this week we get three kind of masters of horror in this episode. With Halloween, we get the incredible John Carpenter, but with Nancy's movie, we get George Romero, who is famous for Night of the Living Dead and, the zombie sensation of the 60s, 70s, and beyond, and Stephen King, who wrote the screenplay for these tales that came out in 1982 as Creepshow. Nancy, why did you pick Creepshow?
So I saw Creepshow, I think I was 7 years old. And I was at Laura's slumber party. And this movie scared the living daylights out of me.
Did you make it through the entire movie?
I did not. I only have a vivid memory of 2 of the 5 vignettes. The 2 I have a memory of is the first one, which is the one that completely scared me to pieces. Scared me so much, I had to call our parents who were at our family friend's house to come and get me. And that, in this movie, this vignette involved a person crawling out of a grave, ripping someone's head off, killing like 4 or 5 people. I mean, it scared me so much. The second vignette that I really remember has very famous people in it that I love, but the one in between had no memory of whatsoever. And then the final 2 I have never seen until last night.
Because you didn't make it to them when you watched the movie?
That, and I can't remember if I ever tried to watch this again and if I just inevitably fell asleep again. Because this movie is 2 hours long. It is easily 20 to 30 minutes way too long because the 4th story in this movie was 10 minutes too long. We're going to talk about all 5 of the stories in some detail, I guess. But also, we're going to rank them later because just as an interesting way to kind of talk about why they were good or whatnot. But
because this
movie was basically a complete piece of garbage. It was awful. I was so bored. I mean, I was still a little scared, but I was very bored. I mean, scared in like a, it's a little startling maybe.
Things jumping out at you and you get startled kind of thing.
Because each of the vignettes has some kind of monster in one shape or another.
Yeah. I mean, George, that's one of the things that George Romero was really famous for, is doing horror in a way with, you know, what he had at the time. I mean, the way that special effects and costumes and props and everything have come along, you know, in the years of, you know, leaps and bounds compared to what, I mean, and they weren't using, you know, a lot of digital kind of anything in this movie. Yeah. But one thing that I found really interesting is it seemed like in the 80s, it became very popular to do like these little anthology movies, because like there was like Twilight Zone, the movie, Creepshow.
But Twilight Zone was infinitely better.
I mean, yes.
Creepshow, I feel like it was just this really weird knockoff of what a good Twilight Zone anthology could be. Because there was a Twilight Zone anthology that I remember having, like John Lithgow terrified on an airplane and then seeing a gremlin out on the wing.
Well, in the Twilight Zone, the movie,
it was good.
In Twilight Zone, the movie, they were basically redoing classic episodes. Yeah,
and there weren't necessarily monsters in all those vignettes, but in this one, this was a complete struggle to rewatch. One, because I just had this lingering fear from when I was 7.
And how does that fear still exist?
Well, no. I mean, it's because they make it seem like kind of like a comic book. I mean, in fact, there is a comic book that kind of opens the movie, and in between, as they're moving from one story to the next, they kind of end with like comic book imagery, like a panel in a comic book page is what the final shot of it ends up being, and then it's like the becomes a cartoon, and then it flips a couple pages to introduce what the next story is going to be. But oh boy, it was a total turd fest. I mean, the Father's Day vignette is the first one. And again, this is what I remember so vividly as a kid. I mean, I remember this evil father who had been murdered. Oh, by the way, we're going to completely spoil all of these. These are old movies, so we can't care about spoilers, especially if this movie's just so horrible. I don't care. I'm just really revealing everything if I want.
Well, and it's really hard to talk about 5 different stories without really kind of giving something away. And it's... They're so short that, like, if you're and especially with Creepshow, if you're talking about them, I mean, a lot of everything happen. I mean, some of them are only like 20 minutes.
Well, so as I've stated before on the podcast, I like a movie that is well edited. I like a movie that doesn't linger or overplay its hand. Halloween is 90 minutes long. Halloween is a very tight, short film, and it's really great. But Creepshow somehow is 2 hours long, and I don't understand. Mulder is super talkative tonight.
Well, you know, it's that time of year.
Well, and he watched these movies too, and he must have been pretty irritated at Creepshow.
He was falling asleep during Creepshow. I admit, he was really falling asleep. And another vignette movie, which is also Stephen King, would have been Cat's Eye, which
I didn't know that's a vignette.
Yeah, it's got like 3 or 4 different stories, all surrounding this cat or cats, and that's a really good one that, you know, is way more entertaining.
Yeah. So the first vignette is called or I just refer to it as Father's Day.
It's called Father's Day.
Okay, and it's about this really, really evil old man who eventually was disabled or in a wheelchair and is very mean to his daughter, and she's like on her last nerve. She's a caretaker to him, and she kills him. She takes a marble ashtray. I'd always remembered it as a marble rolling pin, but I guess it was an ashtray, and crushes his head with it. But all these years later, she keeps visiting his grave. And this one Father's Day, he emerges out from his grave and kills her, and then kills a few other people.
He kills her
and Harris,
her aunt, Ed Harris, and 2 little kids, or 2 like his nephew, like his niece and nephew,
and the servant
lady.
Yeah,
and And probably the famous line from the whole vignette is surrounding, what his daughter was doing before she killed him.
I want my cake.
Yeah, he was just screaming for his Father's Day cake, and she just went nuts and then killed him. And then when he came back to life, that's all he said.
Yeah, I mean, and the final shot of that vignette is this kind of stuffy British. Was she British, maybe? I don't know. She just seemed old-timey.
She was just sophisticated.
Yeah, she just kind of like that.
She had a very sophisticated air about her.
Yeah, he ripped her head off and put a bunch of frosting on the top of her head and served it up on a platter and like, I got my cake. That is what threw me over the edge, and I'm like, okay, I cannot stay at the sleepover anymore. I need to leave.
Did it change your opinion about Father's Day?
No. No, not at all. But it just was burned in my brain.
Yeah.
So that is, and I'll say, I think of the 5 stories, that's the scariest one to me. I actually, we haven't gotten there yet, but I actually had to put a scorecard together today.
Oh, interesting.
And before we talk about the other stories, I'll just tell you how I had to rank these. I ranked them on a score of 1 to 5, and I ranked them on the characters overall, like are they interesting characters? How memorable was the story? Gave kind of a grade to the effects. The overall story, was it interesting? Was the monster in the story good? Mm-hmm. Like an interesting, and the execution. And for me specifically, execution means,
were you satisfied at the end?
Was it too long? Like for me, did it drag on too long? Was I bored to tears, kind of thing? And
wow, you took this ranking very seriously.
It took me a couple minutes, but I mean, I got to play with a spreadsheet. I got to, use some numbers. I have like final totals and everything for these here.
Oh wow!
Maybe I'll put a picture of my scorecard on our Instagram or something.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, but this Father's Day episode is, again, it really shaped. It left such an impression on me as a kid. I mean, and we also at this age, there was a Alfred Hitchcock TV show that had a few scary things, never anything gory, but it definitely freaked me out.
In the 80s, we also had Tales from the Crypt. I mean, that was basically the same thing, just not put in a movie form.
Yeah. We'll get into the rankings later, but this movie this story, again, was really tough for me. You move into the second story, which was my least favorite. It was about a meteor that comes, and Stephen King is the actor, and he basically grows all this green moss all over him and his entire property, and he ends up having to shoot his head off with a shotgun later. It was so stupid. It dragged on. I hated it. I hated every moment of that story.
Okay.
What did you think of it? Was it dumb to you?
It wasn't my lowest ranked one. Oh,
really?
But it was so goofy. It was ridiculously goofy.
He kept calling himself a lunkhead. It was so horrible. It didn't make sense.
Stephen King, I think he has played like small roles or had like little cameos in other things, and this one, it was very like intentionally bad.
Yeah,
like it was intentionally bad.
So again, why have it in there at all? Like,
okay,
save us the 12 minutes or whatever it was. The third story was my favorite, and it was about something to tide you over, and it had everything I like. It had Leslie Nielsen as this very evil bad guy who all these years, again, I'd thought that was George Peppard because they kind of look similar, but no, Leslie Nielsen, who normally was really goofy. Like, he was in Airplane. He was in all the Naked Gun movies. I mean, but he is this very rich, owns a private beach, crazy jealous husband, and he decides to bury his wife and his lover, who is Ted Danson, bury them alive, and they come back as evil sea monsters and bury him alive.
I didn't even catch on that was his wife and she was cheating on him with Ted Danson. I always thought he came in there like she owed him, like Ted Danson like owed him a debt or something.
No, because Ted Danson said, you're going to get out of this easy. You're not going to have to pay a dime in alimony because she just wants out.
I didn't catch.
Yeah, they were having an affair.
Oh.
Ted Danson with his thick, full, beautiful hair, and he was so great in this episode. And
if it's real.
If it's real, but who cares? So that was my favorite of the three. And then the next one, which was way too long, half-hour long, it's called The Crate, but it had way too much going on. But I liked it a lot, but it had a lot going on. It had a very, very bitchy, mean wife character played by Adrienne Barbeau. Barbeau, is that what I was saying? Hal Holbrook, her poor husband who had to put up with her shit. A lot of stuffy professors, which was pretty funny because he would have all these fantasies of killing her, and like in one part everybody claps and applauds that he'd shot her in the head, and that was funny. But then they also throw in this Bigfoot monster thing that ends up killing a lot of people, and it just, I don't know. It could have been executed a little better. That's why it's not like my second most favorite story. Just the length of it was too long. It easily could have been 10 minutes shorter and just kill her. Because really, the whole point of that story was to get rid of the stupid wife. Yeah. And make it look either like an accident or there's no trace left behind. And then the final story, which was done very quickly, it was very tight. And it's not my least favorite. In fact, I think it might be my second favorite. Is all about a really evil, maniacal, rich man who lives in a sterile environment with the exception of hundreds of thousands of cockroaches that ultimately kill him. That, I never saw that one or the one with Hal Holbrook until yesterday watching it. And yes, the cockroach episode is very gross. It makes you itch. It's very disturbing, but I thought the pacing of it was great. I liked the kind of confined space that it was in. I just thought it was very interesting. And you learn enough about what a horrible asshole this guy was that when you see that he gets eaten alive from the inside out by cockroaches, you're like, yeah, great. He earned that. He deserved that. It was like he was a cockroach. So, anyways. Why don't you go over yours and then we can do a final discussion of my ranking later.
Wow. Wow. We have some differing opinions on this one. Overall, I think my favorite thing about this movie is the intro and outro scenes of the movie. The movie starts off where a dad is basically taking away a kid's comic books. Mm-hmm. And the comic book is Creepshow. It's called Creepshow. So there's like all this really kind of cool animation that happens in between the vignettes with the Creepshow mm-hmm. comic that looks really cool. But like the dad takes the comics and throws them away
and slaps him really hard across the face where there is an imprint left on his face.
Right.
Evil.
And
he's the monster in that story.
And then after the last vignette, the end credits are, some guy's like going through the trash and he finds the Creepshow comic books and he notices that there's a clip out or like a coupon cutout of one of the books for a voodoo doll. Mm-hmm. And then the dad starts having like this weird pain in his neck and it turns out his son has sent away for the voodoo doll and is like torturing the dad with the voodoo doll. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of this mm-hmm. whole movie. I think that this was probably one of those movies that falls under like the very campy kind mm-hmm. of horror. And if you're looking at just effects and stuff like that, where you're just looking for like weird, gross out effects, it's almost like Stephen King wrote the stories to go around ideas that George Romero might have had. Like, oh, I want to do this great effect where like cockroaches bust out of some dude. Write me a story around mm-hmm. that. Or what if some dude turned into a plant? Write me a story around that. Or maybe how crazy would it be if someone was buried alive in water and they drowned by, the ocean mm-hmm. tide coming up and drowning them, stuff like that, which could have very well happened to people like in the, like, I imagine that as like a way a mobster would kill somebody.
Yep.
Which is, I think, why you like that story.
Yeah.
Because you love mobster kind of stuff. I didn't take a lot of notes on this one.
It's okay.
Primarily because overall...
You hated it?
No. Some of it was entertaining. Mm-hmm. but ultimately I just got bored.
It was very boring.
I got bored. I
had to restart it like 4 times.
And I really wish that... I understand why they made this movie. George Romero's not going to make a television show. Stephen King has written for television, but I doubt he would have written all these for television. But if I were to watch each one of these as like an episode of like a television show, I'd probably have been more entertained. This is how I ranked them.
Okay.
My favorite one is the Father's Day one.
Yeah.
It is the best acted.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And it has probably one of the coolest effects in makeup with the father coming back, like zombie father coming back. And just this whole kind of concept of like, even though you might have like murdered the person who tormented you your whole life, there's something about them that will always torment you.
Mm-hmm.
There's not this whole kind of revenge kind of thing.
I think I'm bumping it to my second favorite.
Really?
Yeah, I think I definitely scored it way too low on a couple things here.
If anything,
so, yeah.
it gets ranked high just to see Ed Harris with more hair
and
dancing.
I was going to say dancing around. He was amazing.
I mean, that was great.
Sexy too back then.
And I really think that the shot, like the final shot where, zombie dad is holding the head on the platter that's all done up like a cake. That's a great shot.
Yeah. Yep. It's bumped to my second favorite.
My second favorite is the Ted Danson episode because that's the one that always stood out to me. I have seen this entire movie, and I remember watching the whole movie.
Okay.
But I never could remember like what happened in that second one or what happened in the fourth one. It was just it didn't leave an impression on me like the Ted Danson one, primarily because of the realness of you could actually get buried in sand and someone could drown you.
Yep.
So
and we watched Cheers a lot growing up, so we were very familiar with Ted Danson.
Right, and Leslie Nielsen, and we're very familiar with the two of them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this right now. I'm not picking any favorite character, favorite scene on this. We're picking favorite vignette, and
that's fine.
That's pretty much it. So that was my next favorite one. I actually really enjoyed the crate one. I know it was long, but
I did too.
The
Hal
whole
Holbrook is great.
And
He's so wonderful.
And this whole concept of, we've got this mysterious crate. It's got this monster in it. We should be studying this, blah, 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 blah. And he uses it more as a tool to get rid of his wife. Just seemed, it was just so, it just seemed so cynical.
Well, I think I think the setup of seeing...
sadistic kind of.
Yeah, I think the setup of seeing earlier from the very beginning that he fantasizes about killing her,
and then he has an opportunity to do it,
and how horrible she was. Oh my God! Again, somebody deserved it. It was her.
Well, and she so stood out as like one of the wives. Like she was that drunk party wife that almost like a trophy.
And she just thought, "Oh, what would you do without me? Oh my God, you're such a child." And she's horrible.
Yeah. And then my number 4 on my list is number 2. Only because
so you ranked cockroaches last.
Yeah, the one with Stephen King is pretty terrible, but just this idea that he has these weird fantasies. It was just kind of so goofy that I had to rank it higher. I couldn't just rank it last. It just made me laugh almost.
Oh, as he was having the fantasies of going to
going to or selling the meteor and like getting $200 for it, and just it was just so
stupid.
But then I thought it was really impressive how at some point he was just like, I'm going to shoot myself. And then just shoots himself.
Yeah.
Instead of, things had gotten that bad for him.
Yeah. And
then the fifth one, the thing about the fifth one that got me is, first of all, by the time that one was on, because I didn't pause this and take breaks. I watched it straight through.
I did.
By the time I got to this one, I was like, is this over yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had been burned out.
Yeah.
Which for a movie, if I was watching episodes, I would have appreciated it more. For a movie, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work having this one last.
I think the crate one should have been last.
The crate one probably should have been last, or the Ted Danson one should have been last.
Yeah.
Because that one has
It was the most memorable.
Well, and it has the most suspense.
Oh, yeah. It was very, very suspenseful.
It was more suspenseful. This one was basically, I'm taking Howard Hughes, I'm putting him in a horror movie, and and what if Howard Hughes, who had like crazy OCD, like, if you've ever seen The Aviator, and because that's basically who he was. He was Howard Hughes in this room, not wanting. I mean, he would talk through like the door, and people wouldn't talk. I mean, he didn't want to talk to anybody, and he's this huge rich guy being tormented by the thing that would most torment him, and then just all the cockroaches. Apparently, that vignette was pretty expensive to film because every cockroach they had to buy, it was like 50 cents. I think per cockroach, and there was over 200,000 of them.
Oh, it was 200. Oh my god, it was.
That's a lot of cockroaches.
So these are not stunt cockroaches.
No, these are they're professional cockroaches. I mean, if you just want a cockroach off the street, we can get those for 25 cents. But if you want like pro cockroaches, you got to go 50 cents. You don't cheap out on horror movie cockroaches, Nancy. Yeah. You don't.
I think let me just say. The only reason I would defend this last vignette is because there were two very obvious monsters in it. The swath of all these cockroaches.
It's very,
and then
yes.
he is such an evil monster too.
Yeah.
So the fact that he gets what's coming to him.
Yeah.
And I felt like because again it was in such a stark white room, like there's not a lot of distraction the way that I felt like the crate episode had so many different things going on.
Yeah, there's lots of different places to be,
and it just kind of it went all over the place, and this was very, very just focused. And I think in terms of execution, it scored 4 out of 5 on my little scorecard.
Did you recognize the guy who played the Howard Hughes character?
I had to look it up, and I saw he was in Superman 2.
And The Natural. Wasn't he in The Natural?
I didn't see that he was in The Natural.
I'm pretty sure he was one of the guys that was part of the whole blackmail crew, in The Natural. But
you sure you're not thinking of Darren McGavin?
I might be.
I think you are. He wasn't in The Natural. He was in a movie called 12 Angry Men, which I've never seen.
Oh, that's a great movie. The original. Watch the original, the black and white original.
I think that's the one he's in.
That's a great movie. And you in particular, with your interest in law or politics.
Yeah.
Justice. Check it out. I had to watch it for a film class, I believe. So.
But yeah, so it's.
Well, let's go back to your scorecard.
Okay, so
let's look at this. I'm really interested in the scorecard. Actually,
okay,
so which one ranked the best in each category that you made?
Tied. So the one with Ted Danson. So again, I had characters, memorable scenes. How did I feel the effects worked out? The overall story. Did I think the monster was interesting, and the overall execution? Tied got 29 out of 30 points for me.
Wow.
The only thing that it got a 4 out of 5 in was effects. But again, this is early 80s, no computers. So.
Yeah, I read a little story. So again, we're ruining these things. After Ted Danson and the woman he's having an affair with get offed by the ocean, they come back and as like sea monsters, basically, bloated sea monsters. And apparently, when Ted Danson was in the makeup for that, his son was there, and he was very careful to like stay away from his son because he didn't want to scare him. And at one point, he his son saw him, and his son was like, "Oh, hey, Dad." he wasn't taken aback by the fact that he was under all this makeup or anything. It was like, "Hey, what's up, Dad?" So kind of funny little story. That also kind of gives you an idea of the quality of the effects.
Yeah. So I just had to re-rank the Father's Day episode and increase the scores. So.
She's recalculating, folks.
I am recalculating.
And she's doing this on paper. She didn't bust out her Excel spreadsheet for this.
I did not. Okay. So I had it at 19 points overall, where I didn't give the monster being good a whole lot of credit. I only gave it 1 point, but you talking about the father being a zombie and thinking of it in that way, like I'm bumping it up to 5 points for that.
I'm really thinking that the look of the head on that platter, and whatever actor, whatever, however they did the whole like bad zombie father and everything, like the look of that was pretty creepy. And if it scares you that much and left an impression on you that much, it must be ranked somewhat higher.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I added this wrong. So now it actually fully goes. Yeah, now it's up to 26 points. So yeah, I gave it 5s for both being memorable and the monster being good, and 4s for the other categories.
So if you look at each category that you did now, because I'm really interested in this spreadsheet, this was really cool that you did this. I'm kind of curious what won in each category. So for characters, it was a tie between the Tide episode and the Cockroaches episode.
Yeah, because
they were the most dynamic characters. It wasn't all about the monster or anything really. It was about the acting.
Yeah.
For memorable, you have a 3-way tie between Father's Day, Tide, and Cockroaches.
Yeah, I will never forget the cockroach episode. Now that I've actually seen it, I will never forget it.
And you will never forget the Father's Day episode just because of your childhood trauma.
Correct. And I'll never forget the Tide episode because it was by far the best one for me.
Now, I'm very interested in this. Under effects, nothing got a 5. The highest rank you have on effects is a 4 for Father's Day and Tide.
Yeah.
You were not impressed by the effects.
Well, I mean...
Are you... I mean, you're probably comparing it to...
I don't know.
You know...
maybe I should have left that category off, maybe.
I don't know. I think that's a fair category. I mean, if something looked... I mean, you can clearly tell in the meteor plant episode, like at the end when he goes to shoot himself, he's wearing like a bag. It's like, I mean, it's like a cloth green like moss bag that he's in. He doesn't even have hands anymore.
It reminded me, okay, this is going way back. It reminded me of walking around early 1980s, the Alameda County Fair, like the garden expo, and like seeing kind of like weird fake moss for some of the displays where people are setting up their
like AstroTurf almost.
Yeah, it
looked so bad.
Or it looked like really bad artificial plant kind of filler moss.
Yeah.
Like it was. Oh, I wish I had those 15 minutes of my life back.
For overall story, you have the Tide one ranked highest.
Yeah.
For the monster being good, because of your upgrade, it's a tie between Father's Day and the Tide episode.
Because the monster is actually 2 different people in Tide. I mean, it really is Leslie Nielsen is the monster.
Oh, yeah.
But the sea creatures, they're also pretty goddamn awesome, too.
Yes. And then for execution, Tide is a number 5. I mean, you gave...
Tide got 5s and everything.
So it's clear. That's clearly your number 1. Yeah. That's clearly your number 1. And, I mean, Father's Day number 2.
I liked Crate a lot, but it meandered too long. And again,
it did go on for a long time. It went on for a long time.
It was so long.
They really could have, like, in the Tide episode, there was a lot of like dialogue. It was very character dialogue driven, but there was probably things you could have cut out of that and made it shorter. But
Tide could have maybe been a minute or two shorter, but I don't think
the Crate episode, though, oh my God.
It was like 8 minutes too long.
There was way more going on. Like how many times they kept going back and forth between where the crate was.
And honestly, we didn't even need to see it wrap up where he drags the crate off to the bottom of a lake and then, now the monster escapes. Like, who cares? Like, the only thing I cared about in that episode was the monster going to kill the wife? That's all that was important in that episode. Really, and did Hal Holbrook get away with it?
And really, the monster was so minimal in that. Yeah. I mean, it didn't even need to be...
The wife was the monster.
And it didn't even need to be, like, a monster that ate them. It could have just been, like, some box that sucks you into nothingness.
I kept thinking... I kept hoping it would be this vampire in this show that Jack and I watched over the summer, What We Do in the Shadows. I was like, oh, I hope Nandor pops out as a vampire from this crate. That would be so great. I want total annihilation. So are you glad that I put a little scorecard together?
That was pretty cool.
Thanks.
You get extra credit.
Thank
extra
you.
Credit.
I don't do nearly the kind of research for our podcast that Matt does, so I figured I'd do a little bit.
I wouldn't call what I do research, but
I would. So I mean, yeah, I think if I had stayed awake long enough to sit through the whole thing, I maybe wouldn't have appreciated the cockroach episode story as much as I did. But I broke this up. In fact, again, because of my childhood trauma, I knew I didn't want to sit through this in one sitting. But then it became more of a, I'm so bored, I keep falling asleep. So I have no choice but to pick this up and start in the middle because, and I just need to get finished for our podcast homework.
Well, and I'll tell you this, like, one of the reasons why I ranked the Father's Day episode number 1 is because when it was over, I felt like, wow, if everything is this quality, this is going to be fun watching.
It's gripping.
And then the Meteor episode happened, and it deflated the tires, man.
Yep.
It totally deflated the tires at that point.
Yep.
And then it kind of picks it back up with the Ted Danson, Leslie Nielsen team up. Mm-hmm. And then kind of meanders a little bit on the crate one, but it was too long. Like, it could have been, if it was shorter, this movie shouldn't have been 2 hours. No. It should have been an hour and a half.
Yes.
If they could have trimmed certain ones out or a little bit and made it, and I really was surprised that it was 5. If they would have made 4, if you just get rid of the Stephen King one,
mm-hmm.
and then
trim the crate one.
And then trim the crate one down.
And maybe even trim about 2 minutes of all the cockroaches torturing the Howard Hughes guy.
Right. Trim and I agree with you that the Howard Hughes one, the cockroach one, is impressive just for the fact that he's basically acting alone. Yeah. I mean, the only other character is a person on the other side of a door.
And people on the phone. Like, he's making these phone calls, but he's never interacting with anybody.
Right.
Except the bugs.
Right. But I think we're in agreement. Shorter, maybe some more editing, and then this movie I would have ranked this movie higher. Now, they did make a Creepshow 2, maybe they learned their lessons from Creepshow 1. I don't know.
I'm not going to watch it.
And they are now putting it out. There's a premium channel that is, I guess, Hall Scary Movies called Shudder, Shudder.
I will never sign up for that.
And they have a Creepshow television show that is exclusively on that channel.
I wonder how much it's basically going to just be like Twilight Zone.
Or Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
It's basically going to be that kind of thing, which is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I was never into Tales from the Crypt because when it was out, I was kind of younger, and I was like, I don't know whether I want to watch this or not, but I'm sure if I watch it now, I would find some of it entertaining. But, I mean, lots of people tried to redo Twilight Zone, and Twilight Zone is Twilight Zone. Don't mess with it. Just leave it.
Yeah.
Probably the closest thing that people have said is as good as Twilight Zone is Black Mirror on Netflix.
I've heard that too.
And I've heard that's really good, but I've tried watching it. I'm just like, I don't need this in my life. I'd rather watch Twilight Zone. I mean, no offense to it. It's right now. It's not the thing that I would watch now. Yeah. Whereas the old Twilight Zone episodes, they're classic, and I could go back to
and those are very memorable.
Anthology stuff is hard. It's really kind of hard. So
yeah. Oh man, well, I think we've exhausted all the commentary we need for this movie. I mean, again, I'm glad I got to revisit it for the fact that I was so traumatized by it as a 7-year-old.
You're over it now.
I'm over it now, and I do respect. I mean, like I said, the Ted Danson vignette totally held up for me. It was so great, and if I only had to rewatch the 10-15 minutes of that, I would have been good. But at least now I have this it's under my belt. I finally have finished watching it because I finally got to see the last 2 that I'd never watched before and had completely expunged the Stephen King story out of my head. So I can move on from it. But let's move on to a much, much better movie, which I'll just tell you guys, I'd never seen until this weekend. I watched it in my bedroom with the lights turned on because I had all these fears about this movie going into it, like it was going to really, really scare me. And it's pretty creepy. It's pretty creepy, but it's not exactly what I thought it would be, and that is actually a nice surprise. So Matt's going to take it over.
All right. So when Nancy told me that she had never seen this movie, I was very disappointed because I just think that the 1978 original Halloween, and like I said at the beginning of the episode, it's going up there as like one of my favorite horror movies now. It has that like slasher mentality only because of it has kind of that, well, it has that slasher mentality for a lot of reasons, but it's very unique and very simple, and almost it's done in a way where it feels very real. And basically the basic plot is a little boy named Michael Myers at the age of 6 kills his sister, gets sent away to an institution, has never spoken a word since, and his doctor is going to transfer him from one place to another so he can stand trial, and the doctor is going to recommend that he never ever get released because in working with him he just feels like he's pure evil. He escapes and decides to return to his hometown, where he then has a run-in with a then teenage Jamie Lee Curtis. And this is the movie that broke her and, you know, got her into movies beyond this. She's a huge star now. She's great. And then spends the rest of the movie, you know, stalking her and eventually trying to kill her, her friends, and everything. This movie is made by the great John Carpenter. He wrote it, he directed it, and he did the music on a budget of $300,000 in 20 days.
He made this in 20 days?
He made the movie in 20 days.
Dang.
Jamie Lee Curtis apparently was given $100 and told to go get your costume. She went to JCPenney's, bought the clothes that she wore in the movie. She only has 2 outfits in the movie.
Well, it takes place over, what, 48-hour period? Minus the
not even.
opening scene?
I mean, you've got the opening scene where you see the murder of Michael Myers' sister. You have the day he escapes, which is October 30th. And then the day he returns to Haddonfield, Illinois, October 31st, 1978. Nancy was a wee little child, and I wasn't even born.
Nope. You were on the way, though.
I was on the way.
Yep.
That's right. I could have been Michael Myers.
Oh, my God.
But anyway, and the more I read about this movie and the more I look into the production of it, I mean, I just respect it way more. I enjoy it way more because knowing what John Carpenter did on such a small budget, the way he got, I mean, and I think overall, like we've talked about acting in these movies, I think the acting is pretty darn good in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis by far is a standout. Donald Pleasance is a standout.
Even her friends, who are not the greatest,
Yeah.
but
We've seen worse.
There's not a lot of effects in this movie.
Well, now that you're telling me it was only $300,000, that makes a whole lot of sense. And it's not bloody.
It's not really bloody. And I just feel like this could actually happen. Like some person could escape from jail, put on a mask, which for people who don't know, this mask is a bleached white William Shatner mask from Star Trek. And Michael Myers, all he has is this mask and like a gas station attendant's overalls on,
And his weird brown hair kind of sticking out.
and the hair's sticking out, and he just kind of lurks in the shadows. So if you look at the soundtrack and you look at some of the credits, he's just called The Shape. He's not even called Michael Myers. It's just the shape of a character.
Wow.
And I really don't want to give too much away about this movie because
Okay.
I really want people to watch it.
Okay. So I can't tell you what my favorite scene is?
Well, no, I mean, there's going to be some spoilers,
Okay.
so what are you going to do about it?
I mean, it's a horror movie, so people are going to die. So that's...
Yeah, people die.
Yeah.
Sorry. But, the night on how... There's a couple things that happen in this movie that obviously I want to point out. And there's a couple things that I'd like to keep I'd like to not go into too much detail, just for the simple fact that
I'll follow your
I
lead.
really would like people to watch this movie and enjoy it.
Okay.
First thing I'm going to say is, so the night of Halloween, Laurie, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, is going to be babysitting a little boy in the neighborhood. It's someone she babysits all the time, and her friend Annie is babysitting a girl across the street.
The girl is played by Kyle Richards, who's in my orbit because I watch Bravo. She's been on Beverly Hills for like 10 seasons.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
And she talks about this movie as some big claim to fame, and this girl is on the movie for like 5 minutes, so she's completely exaggerated her role in this movie. But
she spent a lot of time watching a movie and wanting to make popcorn.
Yeah, with her, resting her chin on her little hand and looking at a TV. It's like, okay, girl, whatever.
Michael is stalking Laurie and kind of tormenting her friends at the same time, and a lot of the movie, you just kind of see him staring at them. And it's in this creepy way where there's a lot of one shots where someone will be talking on the phone and they're standing in the kitchen, and then they move from one end of the kitchen to the other, and in the background Michael's standing there watching them the whole time, and then when they moved back to the other side of the kitchen, all done in one shot, then he's gone.
Yeah.
Or a door will be open a little differently. I mean, it is so creepy the way it's done.
I think because his face, there's no expression on his face because it's just this blank mask.
Right.
It makes that even scarier too.
Absolutely. And which, again, the other thing and the whole time during this movie, there's this whole undertone of the boogeyman. Mm-hmm. The little boy that Laurie is going to babysit, whose name I can't remember. Tommy. He's getting tormented by kids at school. The boogeyman's going to get you. The boogeyman's going to get you. And he asks Laurie, is the boogeyman real? And she's like, no, of course not. And then the whole boogeyman theme kind of keeps reoccurring throughout the movie. So there's that. And which kind of adds to this whole, am I really seeing someone in the background or am I not? But one of the things that adds to the suspense of this movie is the incredibly memorable and beautiful soundtrack that John Carpenter puts on this movie. He has this very kind of simple piano in it.
It's really high keys, so
it's fast and it's tense.
Yeah.
And there's a couple, and then there's a slow piano piece for Laurie when it's trying to kind of get you in kind of a daze, of the innocence kind of thing. It's not pretty, but it's very simple. Yeah. So the music in this, just that alone stands out.
Oh yeah.
In a way that where in our last episode we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street, and today at work I was like, I want to listen to this. So I listened to the Halloween soundtrack while I'm working. I'm just typing away, blah blah blah.
Doing that yesterday with that Nightmare on Elm Street,
and then I listened to the Nightmare on Elm Street one, and they're 6 years apart, but the Nightmare on Elm Street one, in my opinion, just clearly was ooh, the music in Halloween was amazing. We got to do something like that. Yeah. And it's very kind of they're trying to emulate it with something a little more, it's got a little bit more of an updated, 80s industrial kind of vibe.
Yeah, it's more of a synthesizer kind of quality.
Early, not poppy Depeche Mode, almost.
Well, there were definitely, because Nightmare on Elm Street involved dreams, there were more kind of surreal things about that movie, so you would have more surreal qualities in music. But Halloween is very simple, but so intense.
It's very intense and simple.
I mean, the piano almost sounds like a racing heartbeat.
In some ways, yes.
You just...
And because the budget was so low, and they had tried to like kind of film this independently, like as quickly as possible. It just feels very real.
Yeah.
You know, and there's not a lot of, you know, like effects or gags or anything that need to happen in this. I mean, at one point, Laurie's being chased, and Michael, you know, to try and trap her in one of the houses, just uses a rake, you know, to block the door. I mean, that is something that could easily happen.
Well, I want to interject and say, I think one thing to add to kind of the suspense and like what feels real about this is because it's over such a short amount of time, she wasn't feeling like she noticed that something seemed a little off. Like she kind of thought,
She kept feeling she was being followed.
kind of, but it's not like it lingered on that. I mean, the bulk of what happens is just on Halloween night, and it's probably over what, a 2-hour period, if that.
Well, it's you know,
I mean, so it's not like she
when
was.
she-
She wasn't like telling people, "I'm worried that someone's following me." Like there was never a whole lot of opportunity for her to do that because this all happened so quickly.
Well, you know, when Michael finally, like, Michael picks her because she's something happens when she's walking to school, and then throughout the day, she looks out, she's in class, kind of bored, and she looks out the window and she sees something out there, and it's him watching her, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And when she's walking home, she's like, he's like staring right at her, like she's looking right at him, and then all of a sudden he walks behind a bush, and she's just like freaked out, and she tells her friend who she's walking with. Her friend's just like, "Oh, you're just seeing things."
Yeah.
And then and that kind of happens throughout the day.
Yeah.
And by the time night comes and it's dark, and when she finally sees something going on, then it's full on creepy.
Why didn't she have more lights on in the house?
Because it's Halloween, they're watching scary movies. Okay, so let's start getting into some of these details, some of these questionable details. Okay.
Why did her friend strip down to nothing just because she spilled a little butter on her clothes? I mean,
Okay.
get over it.
Okay. Yes, that was like what the.
So dumb.
She did ask for a robe at one
I
point,
don't
but
care. You're
and
just babysitting. Who cares? Kyle Richards doesn't care.
Kyle Richards.
The girl she was babysitting.
But that's not the whole point. The whole reason why she wanted to wash her clothes was because she was trying to hook up with some dude.
He's just gonna take the clothes off. He's not gonna notice that there's butter spilled all over him.
Whatever.
Oh,
she felt like she needed to go wash her clothes. Okay, couple things here. So I'd like to I'm going to kind of, you know, go on a little tangent here, and I'm going to mention something that is not necessarily related to this movie, but it is. My wife and I have really kind of strong feelings about movies where animals are hurt. I don't like it when like an animal's unnecessarily hurt. So we kind of came up with this idea, and anyone who's out there that is listening who thinks that this is a good idea, even though it might ruin a movie, speak up, and maybe we can push, you know, the movie, you know, whoever does movie ratings to add this. At one point, the family dog of the little girl who's being babysat by Annie is killed. So I would just like to say, what we've come up with as an idea is that movies should have like a warning label, like a paw. Like it should just be like a paw. And if you see the paw, that means that an animal might be killed in this. That is like
Injured or killed.
that's like a character almost. That might make you sad. So this movie needs a paw.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense why the dog is killed. I mean, the dog walks up, starts barking at Michael Myers, and he just picks it up and just
Stabbed it.
I don't know if he stabbed it or if he just crushed it. It was pretty violent.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Paw rating.
Definitely.
Yeah. This is Halloween. Why is Laurie and Annie, for that matter, why are they babysitting these kids, and why aren't they trick-or-treating?
I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, Tommy's kind of in a costume, like a NASA costume or
Oh
something.
yeah. Oh, like that was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. It's like, oh, how quaint. He wants to be an astronaut. You never see kids dressed up that way anymore.
Why didn't they take him trick or treating?
I don't know.
And why weren't there more kids trick or treating? I mean, there's a couple scenes. There's a couple scenes where you see kids trick or treating, but there's hardly anyone trick or treating.
Maybe it's a bad street. I mean, I don't get a ton of trick or treaters on my street either. So maybe they're just on that dud street that all the neighbors have kind of like had a secret agreement to not give out candy, so no kids ever go down that street anyways.
I mean, they
all keep their lights off so kids don't think that.
Well, I'm pretty sure what it comes down to is they shot
plot
this movie,
device.
Well, they shot this movie in 20 days. They only had a $300,000 budget. They weren't going to go to whatever neighborhood they decided to film this in. They weren't going to go to every single house and say, "Hey, can you all decorate your houses?" And we're going to have a bunch of kids here, and that would up the budget. And also, this movie is supposed to take place in Illinois, and it was all filmed in Southern California. So they did what they could with what they had. But one of the things that annoys the crap out of me is they have another friend. No, wait, Annie's... No.
Annie is the...
third friend, or her second friend.
Annie is the less exciting version of Jennifer Grey.
Okay.
She's got, like, the big crazy hair So picture Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing.
Is that Annie?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the blonde is later. But the blonde and Bob hook up later.
But it's not Annie and Bob.
No.
Okay. Hold on. Just want to make sure I got these names straight.
Annie is the other babysitter. And she's the one who spills the butter. I mean, I could be wrong. I've only seen it once, but I'm pretty sure.
No, you're right. You're right. Linda. Okay.
Okay.
Linda. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for letting me double check that,
yeah.
people. Linda, played by PJ Souls, who was in Rock and Roll High School and another movie called Carrie that is pretty good. Linda has like this terrible California accent. She keeps saying like totally, and I'm just like,
Linda's ridiculous.
I'm like, you are not from Illinois.
Get me a beer.
Yeah. She's like stereotypical like slasher movie character where you're like, oh, she's gonna die. So that bugged the crap out of me while doing my rewatch.
Bob's glasses had to have bugged you too, right?
I didn't really care about that. That didn't bother me. Here's another thing that really kind of bothered me. So they know that Michael Myers has escaped. They know he's from Haddonfield.
Wait, there's only... they're not publicizing it, though.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Why isn't the sheriff putting out like an all points bulletin, like, be advised, former resident and serial and killer of his sister, Michael Myers, has escaped and may be returning to Haddonfield? Why is that not happening? Kids, don't go trick-or-treating. Parents, have all your lights on.
Because why would any adults be smart in these movies?
I know. But they're hunting for him. And at one point, Dr. Loomis even says, no, I don't want this out in public. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know what he thought Mike Myers was going to do if it was publicized. I mean, there should have been an Amber Alert of some kind that Michael Myers was out there wreaking havoc or potentially wreaking havoc.
Yeah. The other thing I want to point out is at one point, they kind of figure that Michael Myers is going to go back to his house. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Loomis is just kind of hanging out at the house. And then all of a sudden, he's like kind of just meandering down the street. And what is there? The stolen car that Michael Myers got away from. How did he not see that car like 3 hours before?
Maybe all the sheriffs were like out partying on Halloween or doing their jobs. They weren't patrolling.
Not very good police work.
Dumb grown-ups in these movies.
And then probably the classic slasher horror movie device that you probably see over and over again. When Laurie has a weapon, why does she keep dropping it? And why does she just not repeatedly keep stabbing him? Mm-hmm. When she's got the chance, why does she hang out with him? Slit his throat.
Yeah.
Run away.
Yeah. But why doesn't she leave?
Well, she tries, and the guy keeps going after her. But, well, here's the one that gets me, though. Finally, Laurie does something smart. And the kids do something smart, too. When they finally kind of get out of the house and kind of get some distance from it, they start screaming their holy heads off. And in probably one of the most, like social commentary kinds of things, like, people just start turning their lights off. They're like, oh, yeah, you're screaming. I don't want to help you. Yeah. As opposed to, like, being like, what's the matter, lady? Yeah. There's a psycho killer right there. What are you talking about? Let me help you. Here he comes. Oh, crap. Let's call the police.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you don't have a movie if people are smart in these situations.
Or good neighbors.
Yeah. So, again, those are like nitpicky things to me. But in general, I mean, this movie is great, and so
suspenseful, and
it's incredibly suspenseful. I am so impressed that you watched this for the first time with all the lights out.
No, I did not.
Oh,
they were all on.
They were all on.
Yeah, I had 2 lights on.
You had 2 lights on. So set the scene. You're by yourself.
Yeah, I watched it. I don't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, but no,
during the day.
It was around dusk. So it was getting dark outside, but I wasn't so sleepy and worn out. Because you guys, I'm a total morning person, and after 7 o'clock, don't expect me to always stay awake through things. But I made sure, like, I'm not going to get too comfortable. I'm going to be wide awake. But yeah, I had 2 big lights on in my bedroom while I was watching this.
Wow.
Yeah, but because it's 86 minutes long, I watched the whole thing all through without lots of pausing.
Well, heck, after
no dozing off.
After that, you could have just turned all the lights off and watched it all over again, and then you knew everything that was going to happen. No, because I'll tell you this: I've seen this movie many times throughout the years. I think the first time I ever saw this movie was on TV.
How old were you?
I was probably 10, but I never.
You watched this when you were 10?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But I don't think I ever watched it all the way through. Like, it would get to a part and I'm like, turn that one. That was a turn that one. Uh-huh. You know, because I just didn't make it all the way through for a little bit because it's freaky. I mean, yeah, it's intense. I mean, it can be really intense. But over the years, I've watched it over and over again. My wife and I love it. You know, this is probably top notch John Carpenter, you know, just from a storytelling point of view and everything. Like, it's not that complicated.
John Carpenter, who also did Big Trouble in Little China, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, and if you look at like the complexity of that and can then look at this, you can see the range.
Yeah.
Or Escape from New York. You know, he's got a whole city he's got to escape from. You know, in that one. But I just really love like the idea. I mean, so let's go beyond this movie. So, this movie ends, and then a few years later, they make a sequel to it, Halloween 2, which I would say is almost equally as good. It has a very similar intensity and everything, and it's a continuation of that night. So, and it's got Jamie Lee Curtis reprising her role, and I would recommend watching that movie as well. There's certain things about it that make it, you know, not as good, but it's still a good one. But then you know, going back to the idea of anthologies, they've made numerous sequels to this, but when they got to the 3rd Halloween movie, at that point they said, you know what, we want to make this an anthology series, and they made a movie that doesn't have Michael Myers in it, and it's completely different.
Why call it Halloween?
Because they thought that, like, I guess they thought, like, Halloween 1 and 2, like, that was that whole story, and now that story was over, let's do a whole nother story and just call it Halloween and make everything just happen on Halloween. And it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Interesting connection to Creepshow. The dad at the beginning and end of Creepshow, the one that gets the voodoo doll on his neck, is the main character in Halloween 3. That actor plays the main character in Halloween 3. And then they go back to Michael Myers in 4 and 5, I think is what they did. And then they did another sequel where like Jamie Lee Curtis came back, and it was like the 20-year anniversary of it. So it's called H2O because
She's filming another one right now.
there's that. And then there was like Halloween: The Resurrection, and they've always kept doing this, trying to bring Michael Myers thing back. And then in the, I think it was probably 2000s, maybe like 2010, Rob Zombie was given the opportunity to remake it. He does an interesting remake of the first one, where he really tries to dive into the character, like the psyche and the character of Michael Myers, with like this whole background story that isn't in the original one, with this really complicated kind of background story of who Michael Myers is and why he's going after Laurie and all this other kind of stuff. And it really kind of goes more in the direction of some of his other films that are more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre slasher, like more gore. And so it's a lot more intense and a lot more, but it doesn't have that simple suspense, and it doesn't have that realness that the original has. And then he made a sequel to that, which is just even more of that. And it's.
So you've seen all of these?
I have not seen all of the original sequels. I've seen 1 and 2 and 3. I haven't bothered with 4 and 5. I didn't see the H2O one, which I think even the rapper Busta Rhymes is in one of them. Wow. I mean, it's just, it's just not that good. And then just last year, Carpenter got, back in the producer's chair, brought back Jamie Lee Curtis, and made a new movie called Halloween. It's just called Halloween, but it is like a 40 years later, kind of movie where she's lives in the woods and is trying to, still go after Michael Myers. She's just waiting for him to return, kind of thing. And I really want to watch that one, because that one got a lot more acclaim, to the point where they're making 2 more of these movies: Halloween Kills, which comes out next year, and Halloween Ends, which comes out in 2021.
Kyle Richards is reprising her role.
Really?
For the one that's going to be in the middle, so not the one that
the one they're filming now.
Yep.
And if you follow Jamie Lee Curtis on Instagram,
I just saw something today.
She posted a photo about how they're just starting to film it, and she's got her little Laurie look on. So I mean, there's been a ton of these movies, but it all goes back to this original story that John Carpenter wrote with another screenwriter, Deborah Hill, I want to say.
A lady had some input.
Yeah, nice. The 2 of them wrote it. I just really, like I said, I mean, we got to revisit Nightmare on Elm Street, which, has been, tons of sequels, made tons of money. You can buy Halloween masks of that. Well, you can do the same thing with this movie. This is that other movie of those big 3 that I've talked about, of Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Jason Voorhees. But I'm starting to think this is my favorite one. So, you watching this for the first time, who's your favorite character and what was your favorite scene? So
Laurie's my favorite character.
That's mine too.
Obvious.
I mean, there's something, she has an innocence, but it's just, again,
she's smart,
and so real. Mm-hmm. It's not like, I mean, there's no, like, how do I put this? She doesn't fit into like a mold.
Nope.
She just seems like a normal, average
high
school kid that you would know.
Yep.
She's
Who does a lot of babysitting, so she's good with younger kids.
Yeah,
they tease her about being a Girl Scout, and
they tease her, and they tease her about like never having guys around or anything like that. So she's kind of a bookworm kind of person, but you don't really see that. I mean, you kind of feel like, oh, well, she's kind of a stuck-up bookworm, but she's not, because she's walking around without a bra on, and then she's smoking weed with her friend.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not just she doesn't fit a stereotype, which I think is cool.
Yeah. So Laurie's my favorite character.
Laurie's your favorite.
My favorite scene is in the last, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the movie, when Laurie runs across the street to go find Annie, and she goes upstairs, and she sees Annie laid out on the bed with Mike Myers' sister's headstone on the bed, and then she turns, and then Bobby's body comes flying down because he's like hung him up, and then it opens a closet and finds the third friend.
Linda.
Like that scene, I thought was so great because then from there, Mike Myers is haunting her in that house and kind of creeping around throughout that house. But that like 2 minutes was perfect.
Yeah, that is probably like the scene with like the most where he had to ask like the actors like, hey, I'm gonna make you look dead, so like can you lay there really carefully. I mean, that was probably really hard to do, and then have her like come into the room just be freaked out. I mean,
Yeah.
they do a lot. Carpenter does a lot of like single shot kind of stuff where he's just panning the camera around and not cutting a lot. To have to do that as a lot as as a director and as an actor, you have to really hold that feeling for a long time. One of the things that I read was that Carpenter, when they made this movie, and I don't know if you have this feeling, but like if you're a creative person, sometimes you think like, oh well, when you shoot this movie, you shoot it, you just shoot it as how the movie's going to play out, but that's not what happens. Is you have to worry about like sets and like all these kind of things. So you shoot the movie out of sequence, then you edit it, right? Well, apparently Carpenter had like a meter that he put together for like how scared Jamie Lee Curtis needed to look for that scene. Like, oh, this scene's near the end, so look way more scared than you do in that other thing. So that's where you really kind of test the acting chops. Sure. Which really makes Laurie kind of stand out, or Jamie Lee Curtis stand out. I mean, she's had a tremendous career since this, and like when you see her in this, you're like, okay, she's trading places on. She's just going to take off as a star. I love so many scenes in this movie because, like I said, this is easily top 5, if not top 3, horror movies for me. It's so hard to pick a good scene, so I might just go cheesy. And the scene when Annie goes to the laundry room, which we've both agreed is kind of absurd because why are you doing this? There's like all of a sudden he's in the window watching her, and then she's not, and then the door closes, and just that whole thing. That's really well done. Anything in the house where like they're in the kitchen and then like he appears in the background, but probably the creepiest scene is when Laurie's walking home and he's like in the bushes.
Oh yeah.
Because you and we walked home from school from like 3rd grade through high school, and you're by yourself and you're walking home and there's no music or anything and you don't have headphones on, you're just walking, and then you hear something behind you and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah. You don't know who that is, and if you had seen this movie, it's like, who's watching you behind that bush and that kind of thing. And
did I send you a meme today of that bush scene?
Yes, I think you did. But again, very real.
Yep. I mean, because he kind of comes off as like a kidnapper in that way too. Which,
yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird.
So I'm gonna say the bush scene for now.
That's a great one.
I was really excited when you said you hadn't seen this, and disappointed because I knew that this would be a great opportunity for you to watch it.
Oh, but you shouldn't have been disappointed.
And, well, I was disappointed that you hadn't seen it before, but I was excited that now you get to watch it because I just think it's a great movie. And I think in general, like, forget the fact that it's Halloween. Forget the fact that, it's got, like, the Halloween look and everything like that. Just as, like, a creepy movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess in one of the original scripts, the movie was called like the Babysitter Murders, and it was going to take place over a couple days, but because of the budget, they were like, okay, we'll just have it take place in one day, and that totally added to the effect. Well, it made it a better movie. It's such a better movie, and for people to want to remake it and like keep regurgitating kind of the same characters over and over again just really goes to show just how much movie companies A want to make money, but B also where like the lasting power of this character and these characters in this story versus, you know, other ones. I mean, because how long has it been since, you know, a Nightmare on Elm Street movie was made? I mean, you had the remake that didn't have Robert Englund, and then it just stopped happening. You know, even
they've exhausted all the
Friday the
nightmares,
13th. I mean, it would get old. I mean, I almost like what they're doing with these movies more, even if they're redoing it or, you know, picking up the story where it left off 40 years later. That's even more interesting than, oh wait, the guy came back again. Now he's tormenting a whole new group of teenagers. I mean,
well, so you're like, what the issue you're bringing up with? Why do you keep regurgitating it? You know, how does if this monster never dies, then what's the point? That's how I feel about the Walking Dead TV show. Like, I gave up watching that show after the 3rd season, mostly because a character I really liked ended up dying. But that show to me doesn't seem like it ever has any hope or any way out. Like it, I mean, I haven't seen it in so many years.
I haven't watched like the last 3 seasons, 3 or 4
seasons. But it just seemed to be like there was no possibility of them ever curing the zombie curse or the disease, and it was just going to be insurmountable odds. And it's like, why do I want to watch this?
I almost feel like,
sorry for all the Walking Dead fans out there. I had to let go of it a long time ago.
Well, no, I mean, I think whenever a television show goes on for a long time, if you're not seeing something that keeps your interest, then it's okay to abandon it. Yeah. I mean, The Simpsons has been on for like 30 years now. I know people who gave up on that, you know, a long time ago.
After 15 years?
But I think one of the things about The Walking Dead is that it's almost like I have like a lot of mixed feelings about The Walking Dead. I was entertained by it, and I got swept up in like the intensity of it. Mm-hmm. But then after a while, I was just like, I'm watching Doomsday Preppers or something like that, and I don't. There's a lot of times where I want to be entertained, and if I'm not being entertained anymore, then it loses it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, again, I'm really glad that I got to revisit this movie, and I'm glad I got to introduce you to it.
No, me too.
And you liked it.
I did. I mean, I don't know when I'm going to hurry up and watch it again.
I mean, let me ask you this: if you were flipping through the channels and you didn't know what to watch, and you stumbled upon it, would you stop and like watch a little bit of this movie?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't normally do that. I don't normally flip through the channels and land on a show for.
If your boyfriend is doing that, and then all of a sudden and then you're like, oh wait, stop here right here for a second.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, again, I think because it was, you know, well executed. It used its time very wisely. Like we were saying, there weren't a ton of major effects or anything. I mean, it was. Yeah, I think I'd rewatch it. I mean, again, I'm not in the mood to rewatch it anytime soon because, again, as we discussed last week, these kind of movies are a challenge for me in general. But no, I acknowledge that this movie is of high quality and is really good.
I think because I'm not like I've said before, I'm not a you know, horror movie aficionado. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't seek them out, and I don't sit there and try and like swallow every different type of horror movie whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But it's not that adrenaline rush for me. But like I would put this in the same category almost as like Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, I mean, it's really creepy. I mean, and then you've got like this idea of like a mental patient. Mm-hmm. And the therapist or the doctor treating the patient.
Yeah. One last thing I would say, like I was thinking about this today because I rewatched the movie and I was like, man, this is so good, and they did it on such a good budget. It just goes to show that like you don't need like a huge Hollywood backing. Like I would challenge someone like in like get like a high school kids or something like that who want to learn how to use iMovie or something like that. Get like a classroom of kids together. Get like a group of kids together and like bust out your iPhone and remake this movie. And I bet they could like do a version of this movie that is pretty darn good.
You know what I'm picturing? So Ryan Murphy, he does so much stuff for TV. I mean, he's got
American Horror Story,
Glee was a big story.
Nip Tuck,
just tons of stuff. When Glee was on, he had a kind of like The Voice. It was a casting competition show, and very behind the scenes or whatnot. I can see him being someone that would put out a contest, and you could have, like you said, primarily like high school age kids. You could see what their behind the scenes would be, and then like whoever they decide is the winner, that is the movie that gets a wide release.
There's been that there was a show called Project Greenlight on Bravo for a while, and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon produced it, and I think it was on
HBO. I don't think it was on Bravo.
I thought it was on Bravo. Well, they did that exact same thing where they had people bring scripts to them, pitch them ideas, and then a guy directed, and it was this movie called Feast is what actually came out of that. That I have never watched, and again,
never
it's
heard
a horror
of.
movie. Yeah, but even pick a scene, get your phone out and try and redo the scene, one of the scenes in the movie. I just think that would be cool, because you could. Just take Carpenter's music, throw it on there, and make it look professional. You could totally do that for this movie.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely say the raw material that will still be available to you is the soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
And and obviously a majority of the script. I mean, you could do a couple things here and there to update it, I guess.
Yeah, you could probably even if you needed some star power, see if. Maybe someone who was in movies around the 80s who's older now could play Dr. Loomis. Who could that be?
I would say maybe John Cusack could play that
Wouldn't
role.
that be amazing?
Would be amazing.
If someone had the connection to get him in that homemade movie to play Dr. Loomis, I think he'd be great in that role. And I'm serious. I think he would be a great new Dr. Loomis. He
would be a really good Dr. Loomis.
In the Rob Zombie ones, it was Malcolm McDowell. Which was pretty good, which is really good.
That's great.
Yeah, and then if those same people who know how to get John Cusack into the high school remake of Halloween could also tell us how they got in contact with him, so we could get in touch with him.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Because we'd like to ask him about that experience, and maybe some other experiences he's had acting. But, great. I had a lot of fun rewatching these movies. Well, at least one of them.
Yeah. one of them was boring and torturous, and the other is Halloween.
Yeah. But, so I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to, if you have any comments about either of these movies, anthology movies, or, maybe you really enjoy some of the other sequels to Halloween, maybe you can convince us to revisit them and check them out. Halloween 2, I think, is pretty darn good, and I'm probably going to end up rewatching that before Halloween. The holiday Halloween. So, thank you very much. Follow us online, Nancy.
Follow us on Instagram. Thank you very much, listeners.
Yeah, and just to put everyone in the mood, I just wanted to say one last thing here.
Tangina? No.